Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene our fourth of 5 programs on regenerative health and look at how we can empower ourselves in a world of increasing turbulence and challenge. As we begin today, I want to delve a little bit more deeply into the domain of archetypal possession and what happens when a culture like Germany in the 1930s is collectively seized by a negative archetype and proceeds to descend into the abyss of destruction, both to others and ultimately to itself. I want to touch on this again because I believe, as I said yesterday, that we're witnessing the same phenomenon in the United States of America in the present time. It's the only way to really understand the irrationality that has gripped the United States, which is now, as you all know, fomenting war not only against the Russians in Ukraine, but against the Chinese, taking on 2 superpowers simultaneously and escalating tensions with actual war taking place with U.S. troops now on the ground in Ukraine, and increasing predictions of war with China by 2024, 2025. For a superpower at this moment to be doing this can only be described as insane, particularly given the fact that we urgently need cooperation between the nations to solve the critical issue of climate change. You also see the grip of an archetypal form inside the United States with the mass slaughter that is taking place daily. There are 2 mass shootings now taking place in the United States every 24 hours. Last year, 2022, there were 647 mass shootings. And the shootings so far in 2023 are in excess of the statistical norm from last year. So you see a country being consumed by itself, on itself, with violence spilling around the world and violence consuming the polity within the context of completely paralyzed politics. That's not happening in a rational world. That's happening in a country that is now in the grip of a mass formation. It's in the grip of an archetypal possession. And I want to just say a couple of comments very, very quickly, just to seed some thoughts in our collective mind. First, that if you look at what Jung said, who was the first one really to describe this phenomenon back in the 1920s and 1930s, he says that the characteristic that grips a nation under the seizure of an archetypal formation is inflation. Inflation is how you blow up a balloon. You inflate the balloon. So you could tell that the Germans were being inflated by an archetypal possession because they got more and more inflated about their rights as Germans, about who they were in their Lebensraum, and the fact that they were the superior race. That's a case of inflation. So United States is the unipolar power, the great hegemon in the world. We've got to take everybody on, and we've got to protect the Second Amendment, and we're who we are as sort of a providential nation, is a function of psychological inflation. The paradox, said Jung, and this is really important, is that while the country is engaged collectively in mass hysteria, the individuals comprising the mass hysteria all seem normal. That's the irony and the paradox of mass hysteria. It's very hard to discern, because when you look around, the people that are engaging in the war machine or engaging in the legislatures, as the Republicans are, to absolutely prohibit any movement on gun control, they all seem individually very normal. And it's the normalcy of our individual actions that preclude our capacity to see the totality of a system that is about ready to go off the cliff in an orgy of further self-destructiveness. And the third point that Jung makes is that the only way, in the context of mass hysteria, to save your soul is to be consciously aware that even though you don't understand the totality of the complexity of the possession of the culture, you center yourself, you ground yourself back into the natural order, and you focus as an individual and as communities on your own, what we would call regenerative health. That's, according to Jung, really the only antidote for how one should act in a state of mass hysteria. You know, he was skeptical whether overt political action would have as much utility as a dedication to an interior healing process and fortification process that enabled one to withstand the energetic force of a collective possession. Because when the energetic force seizes the collective, it makes it harder and harder for an individual to maintain their equilibrium and balance. And this is one of the reasons why we have Humanity Rising. If you think of Humanity Rising, we're like an oasis in a sea of madness. The collective hysteria that gripped the world around COVID, for an example. That's when we originated, because we wanted to create an antidote to that collective hysteria that was gripping the entire world, and everybody was in lockdown, and everybody, that's collective hysteria. So Humanity Rising, day by day by day, is just simply bringing common sense to all of you who are watching it, wherever you are around the world. And I can't tell you how many emails and communications I've received from people I've never met that said that they were deeply thankful for Humanity Rising. Why? Because it allowed them to keep in touch with their sanity, with their common sense. So that's why we breathe. That's why we meditate at the beginning of our sessions, because we are wanting to empower all of us with practices that can enable us to continue to deepen the reservoir of our own self-awareness in an empathetic, compassionate framework that is motivated around self-healing and healing the world. So that is why we're here, and that's why we support programs like you're seeing this week with Stephanie and Stella and Spring around regenerative healing, because in a time such as ours of collective madness, this is the most important thing we can be doing. because the greater the centrifugal force of the chaos, the greater we have to develop the internal coherence to maintain both psychic equilibrium and mental health, but also the fortitude to simply be able to navigate skillfully through the rising chaos. And I know this is a strong thing to say about what's going on in the United States, but I think it's, if you really look at it from the point of view of certainly Jungian depth psychology, he would agree, and in fact, after the Second World War, he predicted that a miasm, he said, greater than what gripped the Germans would grip the United States and the West generally, because of certain functions that we don't have the time to go into, but would be worth our collective contemplation, maybe at a session down the road. So I want to thank everyone for attending as you do Humanity Rising. The various other points of light around the world are extremely important for us to attune to in this moment of historical development, when the world literally teeters on the brink of self-destruction because of the mass formation that has gripped our collective psyche. And it's only in that cauldron that the importance of the discussions we're having this week really take shape. I want to now welcome Stephanie Mines, who has convened this session today, to take the podium. Stephanie, I so appreciate what you and Stella and Spring are bringing forward this week, and I hope I haven't spoken too strongly about the importance of taking you seriously, but such is our world.
I listen very carefully to you, Jim, every morning, because you are really tuning in to what I have already been processing for each day in a way that sheds a much brighter light on it. So the theme today of empowerment-based healthcare really addresses exactly what you're talking about, which is this miasm, this seizure, this possession that preceded COVID, of course, that is around what health is, what healthcare is, who the doctor is, and how we can not only erase those misconceptions that have been instilled into us by a manipulative structure of corporate greed, and everyone knows all those adverbs there and adjectives about how that has taken place, patriarchy, capitalism, etc. How we can not only erase and alchemize those misconceptions, but become skillful in supporting others in erasing that within themselves. There is clinical evidence that, for instance, women diagnosed with breast cancer will live longer if they advocate for themselves, if they question their physicians, if they take action on their own behalf. And the medical profession, which I do not want to appear to be discounting. I know the value of allopathy and Western medicine. It has served many in my own family, many around the world, and it is a useful structure. But when it serves as an authoritarian, manipulative, disempowering service only to the profession itself, rather than to the people it is supposed to serve, then this madness has taken place. And it has taken place throughout the world. And the evidence of the failure of medicine to serve the people in the US, the richest country in the world, is so astounding. It breaks your heart. It breaks your heart over and over and over again. And it's actually out of that broken heart that I have developed Regenerative Health for a Climate Changing World, and reach out to empower a regenerative health practice. So I'd like to bring on the wisdom of my faculty. Stella Osorojos Eisenstein will be featured today, but Dr. Spring Cheng is with us also. As you've seen over the past days, we are emergent and evolving and relational, not only with all of you who we desperately want to see. The desperation grows, I think, every day as this whole conversation has gained intimacy. My longing to see who I'm talking to is even greater. So please join us. The after chat has become quite vibrant, with really detailed questions about the program itself and the permutations of the program. So please take ownership of this program in the sense that it can serve you as a structure and a community that helps you deliver your ideas, to focus and delineate your own ideas about regenerative health, put them into a form. I'm much an advocate of writing and creating a potential book, white papers, blogs. These can be the product, really, of your investigations. And we embrace people who don't feel perhaps they need a degree, but want that community and that structure to support the evolution of their feeling and thinking and somatic experience. So today we are going to zero in on the empowerment aspect. It's really core to regenerative health. And our featured speaker is Stella Osorojos Eisenstein. So Stella received her master's in acupuncture and oriental medicine from Emperor's College. She has studied with extraordinary Meridian master, Dr. Yvonne Farrell. She has also studied orthobionomy and integrative manual therapy in depth. She developed her program, Resonant Attention, from these immersions, but also, and this is key, it's true for all of us, as a result of her own healing. And that's a key piece here. All three of us, as your faculty, come to regenerative health not only as a result of our research and studies and extensive experience with patients, but out of our own experience. Stella has had that experience in healing herself from scoliosis, breast cancer, and autoimmune thyroiditis. She is a writer. I'm very happy to share that definition of self with her, and the author of Star Sister, a rollicking memoir of awakening. I was delighted to learn that, like me, Stella once taught writing for youth. That's another thing that links us, and that is a form of regenerative health. When you are assisting and mentoring young people to express themselves, you are promoting regenerative health for the future. She is an artist and a mother and an active advocate for reskilling, if not revolutionizing, healthcare and our very concept of medicine. Stella will do our somatic attunement this morning and lead the conversation today. Thank you, Stella.
Thank you. Gosh, there's so many threads that I want to pull on, and I want to do them all immediately. But, let me start actually let's start by doing a little attunement. And my plan for today is to kind of help you understand where I got to with the perceptions that I have around resonant attention. And then we're going to do a little show and tell with Stephanie to just kind of give you an experience of resonant attention and kind of what's possible in healthcare. And then I might read something if we have time, but let's start by just dipping into, I think the planet in general is moving into, perhaps goosed by, Eisenstein's discovery about energy, E equals MC squared years ago, which I remember being in class, when I first learned that. And I said, what are the implications of that? And my teacher said, we have no idea. And that's been like this little thread that has been at the forefront of my curiosity ever since. And lo and behold, has sort of come out into my explorations around medicine and the body and healing. And one part of it is this understanding that perhaps materiality is not so material, that it's actually quite energetic or can be transmuted into energy very much more easily than we thought. And that we are interconnected through this energetic shared reality that some people have, Thich Nhat Hanh most famously termed interbeing, and other writers have talked about it in different ways. It's Rupert Sheldrake talks about it as the Akashic record, and Lynn McTaggart talks about it as the field. There's all different ways of understanding that we are enmeshed in this informational field of aliveness that our ancestors knew intrinsically was the case. They knew that everything around them was alive. We now have a fancy term for that called animism, but ultimately just this living, alive breathingness of everything. So I want to dip into an experience of that just for a moment, because I think it will help attune you to the work we're going to do a little bit later. So just get centered, take a deep breath in. You can say a little prayer. I always like to set intention by just kind of tagging the corners of the room around me and arriving in that space delineated. And then I say my own personal prayer, which is angels, apus, pachamamas, Kuan Yin, bodhisattvas, ascended masters, Elohim, star nations, all those living in the light and serving the law of one. Please be with us. Please help us all to achieve our highest good. Please protect this medicine space as we work. Please facilitate open and honest communication with respect to all life. We dedicate the session to Gaia. And then we can bring our awareness and our attention into the body. And I always imagine my attention just going down the central channels and arriving first at the heart, and then moving down to the dantian, the area below the belly button. And that area below the belly button is such a powerful place to arrive to. It is when in the midst of Mara, when in the midst of demons or, fear or whatever, bringing your attention back to the dantian and just repeating to yourself, right here, right now, all is well. Can be such a balm. But then from this place, we find that we can move our attention really anywhere in the body or in any plane of consciousness that's available to us. Those planes habitually in this culture are quite limited. But if we start to work with it, we notice that we can just, as Thomas Hubel would say, turn the dial of our attention and pay attention exclusively to our physical body. So just turning the dial of your attention so that you're really attuned to what's going on in your physical body. I'm hearing the tingling of bells, and that's activating my eardrum. And I can feel the reverberations of that throughout. But I might also notice there's a little bit of pain in my right hip. And we're not doing anything with this information, we're just noticing it. Being with it. And then we can tune the dial of our attention to another platform of consciousness, our emotional body. So we can, in any way that feels right, but perhaps scanning from the top of the head down, we might notice what's happening in our emotional body. And when I do that, when I bring that platform of consciousness into my awareness, then I notice, oh, look, a little bit of fear around my heart, a little bit of butterflies in my stomach. And then we can tune the dial of our awareness into our mental body. And what's going on there? Are there thoughts popping off like popcorn? Or are we calm, centered? We can also tune the dial of our awareness into any particular organ in our body. If I do a scan of my body and in my physical body, notice, oh, look at that. My pancreas is talking to me a little bit, as it often does. And I could move my attention into my pancreas, and using the faculty that feels like imagination, I could ask my pancreas a question. And if I were bold enough to trust the answer, it might be really useful. But the point here is really just to notice how easy it can be to move your attention in the informational field around us. So you could also move your attention into the plant or the little seedlings at my feet, actually. And I could ask those or I could just scan those seedlings and see what I feel, or the rhododendron out my window. I have the capacity in my body to receive information because I am part of the informational field. And all that it takes to do that is moving my attention into that part of the field and trusting the information that I receive. So we can bring our attention once again back to the Dantian, where it's home. The wonderful meditation that Thomas Hubel teaches is called the 3-sync method, where you just pay attention to each of those bodies, those 3 bodies. And the attention alone synchronizes them, creates coherence between them. Let's open our eyes now, but just stay with that coherence that was created in your body just by paying attention to those aspects. of your beingness. I don't know about you, but I feel calmer. My butterflies are less. And now I've got this wonderful rhododendron ancestor out my window who's with me, which is really cool. Spring and Stephanie, do you have any responses to that you wanted to jump in with? Don't have to, but make the space for it. Not so much. Okay. So
Well, I can just say that I feel like I've been on a long, deep journey that feels like it's taken a long time, and realizing that it's actually only been a very few minutes. Just wanted to report that.
yeah, coherence. Yeah. Yeah.
And I just want to reflect in our attention. So before this exercise, the attention is like the little ripples of waves on the ocean surface, like choppy waves and the whiteheads. And with this, it's like you're going deeper and deeper into the bottom of the ocean, where there's like these huge currents that, the ocean currents, the deep ocean currents that connects the whole all the oceans in the world, all the water bodies. So it's like sinking deep into that deep currents.
That's really beautiful, especially because if I get to it, I'm gonna later read something that's called La Mar de Medicina, the ocean of medicine, and about how interbeing is really like, it's more an understanding of the world as wave, and ocean, than kind of hard line and solidity. Yeah. So I wanted to move into kind of explaining how I got to resonant attention, and actually the earlier talk about mass formation psychosis, and actually Charles wrote a series of essays about Rene Girard, and kind of seeing the roots of mass formation psychosis in these deep human dynamics around scapegoating and in and out groups and power. So we are in a really strong contraction of awareness of human, coming into an awareness of our collective. I think that's the beautiful aspect of what we've been through for the last couple of years. Really starting to see ourselves more in this big way. And in me personally, it really pushed the last few years, and the tensions that arose in our collective field really pushed me into bringing forth what I was living as resonant attention. So I trained, I actually was sort of training to be a doctor my whole life. My dad and my grandfather were doctors, and I used to go to the hospital with my dad, and my grandfather used to go into the countryside in Colombia and teach people to boil water and do a lot of community medicine. And so I have this deep kinship with this idea of being a doctor. And then I got to college, into my master's, my BA program, and I thought I was pre-med until I decided I actually really don't like hanging out with doctors. I want to hang out with the poets. So I canned my plans to go to medical school, and I became a writer. I worked in magazines in New York. It was a great time to do it. I got to travel the world. So I was a travel writer. And then I really couldn't stand not helping people anymore. And I woke up one day and I knew I had to be an acupuncturist. It was the craziest thing. I'd only ever seen that 60 Minutes article, 60 Minutes episode about the brain surgery that they were doing using acupuncture as anesthesia. That was my entire exposure to acupuncture. And then I joined a program and changed my whole life. And actually it was a rocky road because I was really a writer and what was I doing? And so it took me a while to really dive into the program and accept that that was what I was going to do. And once I did, I noticed crazy things starting to happen very quickly. Like, I'd be in the clinic and some intuitive hit would come through and it would really land with the person. And I started really perceiving something else was going on. There was a lot more going on than people were talking people were talking about a lot going on, but they weren't explaining it. There wasn't a context for it. It was just these kind of crazy little phenomenon that would arise and people would say, oh, yeah. Or no. But nobody could contextualize it. And it just kept increasing. So after acupuncture school, I realized I needed to learn a little bit more body work because people were coming in with knee pain and I wanted to be able to help them immediately. And needles were not as efficacious for that as I wanted them to be. And so perhaps because of my own inexperience, but I decided I was going to get a bodywork degree, and fate basically led me into this program called orthobiotomy. And this is much more accepted and known modality in Europe, but it's quite extraordinary. And the first exposure I had to it was being, as I said the other day, I was a guinea pig on the table, and this woman, without touching me, but just working in the field, took away this spot of back pain that I'd had for years that I used to, was crying myself to sleep with every night. And then it was gone. And she hadn't touched me. She hadn't done an intake. And then she taught me this whole program of orthobiotomy, still without context, still, just saying, well, it works, and people get better. And so this is how it went, like body workers are doing phenomenal things in the world every day. And it is completely outside of what we think of as scientific or possible. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. It's sort of like when you go to acupuncture school and they say, oh, where the mind goes, the chi flows. Like that sounds sort of normal because, oh, it's like ancient Chinese wisdom and it's okay that it doesn't really make sense to us, But actually, it's a profound window into what's actually happening, and we just gloss over it and pretend like it's like, oh, okay, it's happening, but let's not think about it too much. And then I learned a wonderful other modality that Stephanie did mention. It's called depth hypnosis, Isuguchi. It's an amazing synthesis of Buddhism and energy medicine and hypnosis and shamanism. So you do energetic interferences, you work with soul retrieval, and it's a really beautiful answer to a lot of phenomenon that we really don't know how to, but again, just being taught as if this is perfectly normal and no context for it. And then I came to meet a woman called Sharon G. Mateo, actually through Charles. It was our first date. I met my husband and my new career. And on my 40th birthday, which was a crazy year, but she was just a brilliant polymath, and she fused all these different forms of body work into what they call integrative manual therapy. And they say, oh, it's just everything that works. And she very, very purposefully didn't really teach what they were doing. She just showed results. She got the state of Connecticut to grant their curriculum as a pathway to a PT license by basically just showing results and not talking at all about what they were doing. What they're doing there, among other things, because they have many, many amazing techniques that they use. But the one that blew my mind in it is this work with what they call motilities. So they teach you, okay, so this is what a virus feels like. This is what a bacteria feels like. This is what the motility that your kidneys are supposed to have feels like. This is what a disease motility feels like. This is what Lyme disease feels like. This is what exudate in the jaw feels like. Like essentially every phenomenon that the body holds, they teach you how to feel it. And then they write a little, and they teach you by just writing a little like cartoon drawing of what it looks like or feels like. And they ask you to hold that in your mind as you're working on the body. Okay. Mind-boggling, right? Crazy. And it works. And it works over and over and over again, and it's teachable. So, so I learned all this stuff and I was delighted, and I was thinking about it, and I realized at some point, I also learned a lot about trauma. I delved deeply into those modalities, and I realized that what happens when you hold your hand on a person's body, and this is IMT, this is not how I teach it now, but when you hold your hand on a person's body and you interact with the field by essentially you interact with the informational field of the body by giving information. If that matches, if there's a resonance there, so you say, oh, you have Lyme, I see Lyme, I see the Lyme. If you are not attached to the outcome, then the body can take that information, that pure information, I see you, and it will spontaneously heal. So the work that I offer, Resonant Attention, I boiled down like the whole class. It's basically on the first page of my website. If you go to resonantattention.com, you'll see attention plus allowance equals miracle. And that's the whole download. I don't teach, I teach, there's a lot of ways in, and people need help in different ways to get there. But the perception, attention plus allowance equals miracle, is applicable throughout all healing. Every single modality uses attention and allowance. Sometimes the form of attention is quite specific. Sometimes the form of attention between two people is very specific. But if you zoom out to that level, you can see there's this beautiful commonality that bespeaks this underlying coherent truth about our existing together in non-separation, in interbeing, right? We are connected. And when we give each other loving attention and allowance, we heal. So different bodywork modalities kind of do that at different levels, right? If you go to a therapist, they're not going to put their hands on you, and you're going to be receiving mostly emotional healing, right? If you go to a doctor and you have something that they have a pill that has the right resonance for, or there's something about the doctor and the patient that's resonant, they can take that pill and be healed because you've achieved the right resonance. You're getting out of the way. The body just heals itself. The work that I do is very body focused, and the work that body workers do is very body focused. And we can be tricked by the touch, by thinking there's some linear causality that we've instigated. And there may be also a linear causality that is instigated by our touch or our holding, or, like if you shorten the muscle fibers, like there's this spontaneous release. But that And that technique, by the way, is called positional release. It's this amazing osteopathic technique where you just shorten, like, you go to these massage therapists and they'll like do deep tissue and they'll push and they'll push. And, finally your muscle will release. But actually, 9 times out of 10, all you have to do is just shorten the muscle fibers and the muscle will spontaneously release. It's a complete paradigm shift. And that's also true if you just do it energetically. So if you just hold the muscle fibers in your mind and you give them a little bit of slack, they will release. You don't even have to touch the body. So I want to give a little show and tell around this because I think that the body piece is really mind-blowing for people. Like it's one thing to go to a therapist and have your emotional releases and then feel better. But it's the same mechanism that works in the body. And this is why I think if we really deeply embraced our consciousness as the prima materia and the fact of our being an interbeing, then how can medicine not change? Because if you can put your hands on somebody and their physical tissues can unwind, or you can put your attention on somebody's physical tissues and they can unwind. Why are we cutting people open? Why are we giving drugs to resolve myocarditis? Like there's so much we can do with just this simple tool. So Stephanie and I had a plan. I was going to give her a treatment a little bit ago, and it fell through because of my crazy schedule. Oh no, I was sick, wasn't I? Probably sick because of my crazy schedule. But so we're going to do a little show and tell today. So actually, Spring, could you, just for my visual, attunement, could you, pop out for a minute? And then Stephanie, could you speak so I can see you?
Yeah, I'm right here.
So, I'm just going to say my little prayer silently again, because it helps attune me to your field. And then I'll do a body scan on you. And then, I'll walk you through it. And I want to say to everybody listening and watching, the healing, we're actually engaged in healing right now, right? Like as we come here together and listen and attend even to these ideas, our bodies receive this information and start to learn from it. And so that's healing. But also, as I work on Stephanie, and actually, if you're sensitive, you're already feeling it starting. As we work on Stephanie, healing capacities and potentials become available in the field. And so I want you to also sit back in allowance and receive whatever healing might be co-resonant with your body, because that's also possible here.
You're speaking to the entire audience.
Yeah, to the entire audience. And even in the after chat or in the, people are watching this on video later, there's information that's being introduced there will be information that's being introduced into the field as we're doing this. There'll be potential introduced into the field that everybody can partake in. And in fact, if everybody does partake, the healing potential will be greater, is my supposition. So, but also my experience, right? Like I occasionally do the group healing things. All right, so let me just.
Can you do the prayer a little more slowly? Because I really love it. Sure. And when you did it before, it was deeply moving for me. And so I'd love it to be just a little more slowly.
Sure. That prayer is available too on my Substack. If you go to resonantattention.substack.com, you can find, there's one of the posts is about it, and it's one of the ones that's available to the public, I think. Okay, so there was one thing I wanted to say, but I guess it'll come back if I needed to. So angels, apus, Pachamamas, Kuan Yin, Bodhisattvas, Ascended Masters, Elohim, Star Nations, all those living in the light and serving the love one. Please be with us. Please help us all to achieve our highest good. Please protect this medicine space as we work. Please facilitate open and honest communication with respect to all life. And we dedicate the session to Gaia. So that helps me to just step into a deeper form of listening, and where I can then do a scan. Okay, so Stephanie, when I do scan your body, there's something digestive happening, and then I do get pulled down. I'm feeling actually, it feels like as your left knee is accessible and your right knee is a little bit more stuffed. And I know that you're having an issue with your knee. And I also feel that left ankle feels like there's an old injury there too. So normally I don't know anything about people's history. And I did know beforehand that you are having an issue with your knee. And the digestive stuff coming up as well is par for the course. Like your body's the way that I work is to attend to where the body is where the body is healing itself right now and augment there. And so it may be that we need to deal with that. The digestive issue is higher on the list for your body than the knee, but actually, and maybe we'll get to both here. So the digestive, and like on the right side of your body, there's digestive, and then the cecum, and then that leg, and what I was calling stuffiness before. It feels like, do you eat gluten?
No.
So it feels like there's this, so the cecum is where the body metabolizes gluten. And so when the cecum is red or inflamed, that's a big issue for a lot of people. It can throw off the hips, it can throw off the knees, it can do a lot of things. But in this case, it feels white from the belly through the cecum and then down into that leg. And the other thing that the cecum metabolizes is radiation exposure. So, if you're my client, I would say to make sure that you're having, you're decreasing your exposure to radiation as much as you can, as we're all on Zoom. So that hip, so there's that phenomenon, this whitish phenomenon that may or may not be related to radiation, but then this hip on that side feels almost fused by this whole phenomenon. And I want to, and I am really being drawn to this more than the left knee. Which knee is bothering you more?
The right.
Okay. Sometimes, with the way the body works with laterality, if the right knee the left knee feeling kind of freer, it might be a place where we want to go because there's what we would call resource there. And so it might be that your body is calling me there to work on that knee as a way to open up the right knee. But actually, as I go into this side on the right, it feels like that hip is where your body really wants to start working. Do you have arthritis in that hip at all? Do you know?
I actually had a bone density recently, and no, I don't.
Right. So let's go into, I want you to put your hands on your hip, in the crease of the hip on the front. And we're just gonna Okay, let's just pay attention at this level. And then we're going to do a big part of what I teach is how to hold this energetic stance of allowing. It's often very difficult for us to be in an attitude of real allowing, and actually just holding this much attention and allowance on this hip. Perhaps you can feel. And if you do, I'd love if you would report it. But to me, it feels like your body, little micro movements, a little bit of movement. I would call this processing. It's not processing like very fast or very obviously, but it actually has started processing. Is that your experience at all, or what are you noticing in there?
I'm not feeling a lot of activity in the right hip. It feels quiet to me. I am feeling the sartorius muscle that weaves around the thigh and actually goes to the lateral aspect of the hip. That feels activated, but that has been activated for a while. But I don't feel that much in the right hip itself.
So let's go into the right hip and try to increase the specificity and make sure that we have the right resonance. So we're going into that hip. And actually, so this, I'm talking really about the hip flexors on the front of
Yeah,
the
that's where my hand is. My hand is actually on the hip flexors in the front.
And we're going to call those into our imagination. And then sit back into allowing. So just give me a minute here to talk about allowing for everybody. One of the ways, so allowing is really an energetic attitude of really getting out of the way, allowing. We might call it love. We might access it through love. There's some things that often get in the way when we try to be an allowing as practitioners. A big thing that gets in the way is actually wanting people to get better. As people working on ourselves, wanting to get better might really get in the way too. Fear of getting better, fear of not getting better, the inner child. So it can be a little bit of an art, and this is where our own healing becomes really important. I talk much more about this in the classes that I teach. But for now, let's just say sit behind yourself or look at this issue with your peripheral vision. Or if you're a body worker and you understand something called interface, we're going to sit back and interface and really just be lovingly attentive, but unconcerned about what the outcome might be. So there are the hip flexors, and we're sitting behind ourselves and letting them do whatever they might do. And then we can feel that in the deeper hip, perhaps in front of the femur, there's almost a black line. And I'm going to see if we can get a little bit more specific with that. So is that fit in the physical body? No. Is that emotional body? No. Is that mental body? No. Is that a miasm? Yes. Okay, so if it's a miasm, we're talking about a pattern of holding in the family lineage. So we're wondering about mother's side, no, father's side, yes. So father's mother, so father's mother. So I'm using kind of a pendulum technique. I'm a little off book with it at this point, but it was a pendulum technique in the beginning, just to ask yes or no questions there. You could do body swaying. There's other ways to do it. And father's mother, miasmatic. And then we can think about what the hip is. Moving forward in life sometimes. Stability. Oh my. Yes. So just informationally in the field, I'm feeling a real crack, in your foundation, right? Like your where your leg and your body, like where you touch the earth, right? Like how you touch the earth. This feeling of how can I be solid? So simultaneous with this feeling is arising a feeling of competence, right? Like it's almost like the outer edges of your leg, the muscles around your leg, the skin around your leg, have decided that they're going to be stable no matter what. But internally, there's this sort of hidden crack. There it is. And I want you to let's just be aware of this black line in the hip and nothing else, even if it has all that emotional. What was your father's mother's like?
My father's mother, Sophie, was extremely depressed. She never really adapted to being in New York, in the US. She never really left Eastern Europe. She was silent, she was rigid, she was lonely, she was almost nonverbal. She still dressed and acted, and she made her underwear out of paper. She never really moved into being in the US and almost disappeared. She almost disappeared. She was just like a statue.
So not moving forward.
Absolutely not moving forward. Whereas her husband, my grandfather, Joe, he definitely moved forward. He adapted, but my grandmother, Sophie, never did.
So let's just add that awareness about this really profound example of not moving forward that is coming through as an informational stream through your lineage. Let's hold an awareness of that alongside this black crack here in the hip. And sit behind ourselves. Just allow those things to be there. What was it like for you as a girl to see her?
Well, it's so interesting that you're drawing attention to her, because I almost have forgotten about her, because she disappeared. She literally disappeared. So she was an empty space. There was nothing there. There was no grandmother there. She was solid, silent. She was virtually mute, sad, just standing there like a statue of sadness.
And for you as a girl to see her.
Mystery, absolute mystery. I felt that way about a lot of my family, but for that grandmother, it was just a complete mystery. Like, what happened to her? Why isn't anybody talking about this? Who is she?
Let's put your hands on your hip as you recall that, right? And keep that crack there, because we really want to bring it into the tissue.
Yeah, I'm actually feeling from the hip flexor, from kind of the center of the hip flexor down into the medial aspect of the tibia. I am feeling like a red line, a kind of an inflamed line that goes directly from the hip flexor to the center of the tibia, which is where I have a bruise. I have a bruise on that tibia. And that's what caused the problem with my knee. The problem is not just really with my knee, it's really with the entire leg structure.
So, okay, so that sounds very much like what we would call a fistula. So we're talking about an energetic fistula there. But let's keep our hands and our attention on this black line through the hip that may have a fistula shooting out to the knee. We can also hold the red line of the fistula to the, there we go, to the knee in our attention and sit behind ourselves and just let the body be witnessed in that. Just let it process through. And your being a little girl having this calamity, this silent calamity happening in front of you. Why is nobody paying attention to her? Why is she not paying attention to herself? How can a person disappear in front of my eyes? And just be with those feelings, and that feeling of a black crack in your ability that's proffered as a model to move forward in the world. And as well, this like wonderful strength around that area that you develop to cope and not be hampered yourself by it, but it's in there and it's needing to be transmuted, right? It's coming to the surface to be transmuted. So this is all very subtle work. And as I pay attention to this black line and this, red fistula shooting down to the knee, the black miasmatic kind of configuration there is changing. It feels like there's some implication into the medulla of the femur, like in the bony cavity of the femur. It feels like there we go. Some of that miasmatic holding is in there. There we go. The body just works with these things. It just holds them until it has the time and capacity and space to heal them. There we go. And then we can put one hand, let's switch and put one hand on the knee where you have the bruise and one hand still on the femur. And let's just acknowledge that red line a little bit more. Let's just notice that it's there and get out of the way. You might tap an idea into that bruised area and say, hey, you could heal now here's an opportunity to heal if you feel like it's the right time. Or this is more of an IMT technique than a resonant attention technique, but you could Imagine a line between that miasmatic head of the femur. It's not really so much a line in the hip anymore, but it's more in the femoral bony cavity. You can imagine a line from there to the bruised area. Sometimes that can help the body. There we go. To me, it feels like the fistula is slowly closing up. Is that anything you're feeling?
Well, there's definitely change in that what I was describing as a red line from the hip flexor down into the center of the knee that has now muted, and there's a kind of a widening of the sensation. It's now circling around the lateral aspect of my knee. So it's definitely a softening of that red. What I'm using the word red because that's the sensation, is kind of inflamed, and that is muted considerably. And there is like a quality of sensation circling around the lateral aspect of my knee and kind of making its way around my knee, like encircling my knee.
Mm-hmm.
And the center, the palm of my hand is resting right on the area where the bruise is. You know, I've seen the bruise in an MRI, so I know what it looks like. So my hand is resting right on that bruised area, and making that suggestion that you articulated, you know, that you could heal now if it's the right time. And there's a little bit of warmth there.
Let's put both hands on your knee. And then just sit behind and see what we notice. There we go. There we go. Beautiful. So I'm just feeling, I mean, to me, it feels like what I was noticing is kind of white from the belly down the hip is really now just in the knee. It's this packed feeling of almost cotton around the knee. And I'm just noticing that and sitting behind myself and letting the body do what it wants, whatever it wants to do with that information. And there, I would say, is the bone bruise. Just as the body processes through other parts, new parts arise. This isn't always the case. Sometimes people's bodies are less fluid, but Stephanie's body is very energetic and fluid here. So one part is flowing into another part all the time. You can see where that bone bruise is and zero in on it and get out of the way. And keep our attention there. There we go. Now I'm just really zeroed in on the bone bruise area. I'm just going to keep working here on this. Oh, there we go. So now so I'm just noticing that the femur is trying to pull back from on the tibial. It's not quite in the right place on the tibial plateau, and it's kind of wanting to move back a little bit. So let's just, yeah, because that femur in your hip is also wanting to move up a little bit too. Yes, wouldn't that be great if it did that? Beautiful. Yeah. Can you tell that that's?
Yeah, I actually felt that movement in the femur. Yeah, it was nuanced, but it was definitely an adjustment on the far right of the femur. Like it dropped down is what it felt like.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. So I'm gonna put what is basically an artificial pause in here. And just because your body, you're just very energetically available, undoubtedly from the work you've done already. But so, just being really specific with the tissues, paying attention, getting out of the way, you can see how if you spent more time there, it would just keep going. Phew. Do you want to tell us how that was for you, or?
I enjoyed it. I appreciate the learning that arises from being witnessed in this process. And I've been addressing this leg. It's incredibly better from the original injury, but I'm now in my 4th year of improving the motility in this leg. And that's why your statement about if it's the right time, it feels like I've been building towards a moment when there could be an even deeper healing. And I feel appreciative of the opportunity to experience your work. So I haven't experienced Stella's work in this way at all. And even though we're all collaborating together, we're all still learning about each other and from each other. So I felt very warm and trusting. I felt very receptive to your guidance. I felt a kind of neutrality in the field. So a sense of, and this is rare, let me say, rare to feel from a practitioner a kind of neutrality, like we don't know what's going to happen here, but we're going to see how your body responds. And for me, that's significant. That's significant. That's spacious. Because, going to a practitioner who has an idea of what they think should happen is disconcerting to me. I think a lot of people are used to that, so they may not be disturbed by it, but I'm quite disturbed by it, which creates a friction already in the field. But I would say that this is an important component of regenerative health, which is to empower the recipient, the person who is vulnerable because they're injured, empower that person to be attentive to their own body, which is how I experienced this practice. So I'm curious to see how it unfolds now.
Yeah, me too. And, if we did a full treatment, it would be longer, and we would follow up more, and it would, so the neutrality that you're talking about, I would argue is what Spring was talking about yesterday, is Wu Wei, right? Is the main thing that I teach, actually. Like, how do you hold this neutrality? How do you, and I think my be beneficial to tell this story that I tell a lot, but and it always makes me cry. But it's about my my own coming very deeply into that type of neutrality, which is around having breast cancer with he was probably 4 at that time, with my son being 4 years old, and how difficult it was for me when I was sick to come into that. Like, I would put my hands on my body and nothing would happen. I couldn't get any processing to happen. I was just absolutely stuck with fear and terror. And I spent about 4 weeks lying there in bed, just realizing how much fear I had. Like, if I didn't get better, what would happen to him? What would I do? Where would I put him? Where would he be? How could it be? And so I spent a long time just weeding through all the thoughts in my head about Carrie and what he needed. And it wasn't until I came to this really profound acceptance of my not knowing, my sense of being held by Gaia, my trust that the universe is unfolding in a way that must be beautiful. It wasn't until I really got there, until I said to Gaia, I obviously my preference is to stay, but I'm in your hands. And it was only then that that processing started again in my body. And within 20 minutes of really actually truly relaxing back into trust, my liver clunked back into place and it started working again, and everything, like it all turned around. I still had a little bit to go, and that was a profound learning for me. And it's the core of what I pass on. This actually being an allowance, this actually being in trust, it brings an energy into the world that I would argue is possibly tachyonic or is quantum possibility, that it contains yes and no, which is life, which is generative, which allows healing, right? Like this, when we allow yes and no, when we don't have to heal, when we could die, that is what life, that's life. And if you can be in alignment with Wu Wei in that way, then healing becomes possible, right? So it's really a problem. I've had patients that have fired me as their healer because I can't tell them, I know that you will get better. I don't know. I don't know anything. I'm here to pay attention in your tissues and get out of the way. And I have found that to be profoundly healing. And I think everybody should know about it, because we all have this capacity. We all have the capacity to pay attention and be with what we find in our tissues. In this case, this, deep miasmatic pain and suffering, which we really scratch the surface of, there's probably more there. But like, if that's there in your tissues, and you're walking around on that and you don't really even know it, it's not unlikely that it will cause problems, but you have the capacity to go in and heal it and get out of the way and feel what's there and let your tissues heal. So I'm not, I'm hopeful about what's possible in the world, even though we are on the brink, of cataclysms every time we turn around. We have so much capacity to heal. There's so much possibility. It's a matter simply of sitting back and trusting and being there. And it's not always actually that easy for people. And the reason we come to healers and we learn these techniques and we go through these processes is because, we need to be held in them. We need other people holding the field for us so that we can step up into this field too, right? This is a collective project. I think it's quite beautiful that it's not one person bringing this regenerative healthcare model, but it's a group of women that are collectively coming together from different corners, but with really the same perceptions about what's necessary at this time. And that, this So I have a couple minutes left, I think. Yeah, so I might read if it's okay, if you'll all indulge me for a second. I have this little manifesto that I wrote during the pandemic. I knowing what I know about healthcare, like knowing that it is this easy to heal it, or relatively easy, but that we all have the tools, like these profound tools of healing in our grasp. Seeing what was being put out there in the world as healthcare was maddening. It was just maddening. And I was losing my mind with frustration every day. And this is why I started offering Resonant Attention, because I just couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand it any other way. And so I started teaching this class. I started teaching it as reskilling medicine because I really, because it is about reclaiming your birthright, reclaiming your own capacities to heal yourself. And, we all have it. So this is my little manifesto. I probably wrote this right in the middle of the pandemic, and I've been trying to figure out a way to use it since. It might be the start of a book upcoming, but this is just one small bit. So it's called La Mar de Medicina. So healing is as inherent to the experience of being embodied as a human on planet Earth as breathing. We heal. We can't help it. Even as we chew chemicals and guzzle endocrine disruptors, even as we inject ourselves with RNA disruptors, even as we blast blue light into our pineal glands, even as we limit our life-giving contact with each other, even as we breathe car exhaust and swallow nanoparticles, yet we heal. Furthermore, we heal each other. Every encounter that we have is healing. When we sit with a friend over tea and listen deeply to their concerns, both parties walk away feeling lighter. When we place a hand on a child's knee, the sting of scraped skin lessens. When we come together with our hearts open to each other, the earth and trees resonate with our love and all expand in health. Even when we fight, we liberate the possibility of healing. Healing is so quotidian to our experience that we almost can't see it. We black magic ourselves into believing that healing only happens in hospitals, in doctor's office, subsequent to drugstore visits. Everything else doesn't count. It's make-believe. It's a dangerous fantasy that could kill someone. Mi culo. Healing is ours. It is as near as our very own hands and our very own hearts. With these, plus the simple tools of conscious awareness, we can repair vessels, mend torn muscles, realign bones, clean up emotional debris, resolve trauma, and even touch back in time and soothe family and cultural patterns that keep us on our knees. And we don't need x-rays and blood tests to diagnose these things either. The human capacity to perceive and respond to information in the field of interbeing is real and growing. There could be no end to the possibilities for healing when we move away from the allopathic view, which idiotically insists that medicine is a matter of flesh alone, and reconsider healing in light of interbeing, the worldview that remembers our connectedness and understands consciousness to be our prima materia. When experience itself is essential, then emotions, thoughts, traumas, and beliefs can be seen as a substrate upon which the physical body flourishes or decays, and these can shift in a heartbeat. Miracles could move from being breakthrough events to the stuff of our daily lives. Imagine having a healer touch your head with light hands and feeling a tear in the lining around your brain lift up and move back into position, and then having your migraines disappear. Imagine holding attention on your own sore ankle until the bones shift of their own accord, and then suddenly crack back into place, resolving the pain. Imagine putting your hands on a child's lower back and having his mother report that his annual scan showed increased blood flow in his atrophied kidney. All of these things and many more happened to me. Imagine what medicine could be when we begin to hack our connectedness. So how does consciousness heal itself? Through attention and allowance, and that simple formula is empowered by ritual. Allopathy is also a matter of ritual, but allopathy doesn't understand this about itself, nor does it countenance its place as one of the many specialties in a panoply of valid healing ritual endeavors. It's a gifted but indulged baby brother whose ego has become quite a nuisance. and its allyship with technology, given life through hyper-concentrated rituals of separation, creates a dark duo indeed. A white-coated boogeyman busy imprisoning angels with a lie that healing is its alone. It's time to lift our eyes away from that fractal. As a ground upon which to build a new understanding of medicine, interbeing is fertile. Actually, it's not a ground at all, but more like the sea. It's an ocean of wave and possibility and relationship in which healers interpenetrate each other, barely able to contain their divine gifts. La Mar de Medicina. To learn to surf with the vast powers to heal that comprise our intelligence, we first have to build the muscles of balance, focus, and flow. We do this through meditation, practice, cultivating the felt sense, and humbling ourselves over and over to the healing process. Imagination becomes an essential tool, as does intuition, the intelligence of the heart, which draws knowledge from both brain and gut. With these simple gifts, we can create bona fide miracles, but our liberation requires our bravery. To move into flow, we have to become radically okay with change and quantum possibility, which holds in its ken all outcomes. In order to heal an interbeing, we have to come to peace with the transcendent notions that death might be the most beautiful outcome, that illness has something to teach us, that we are not in control. You can't turn on the faucet of flow if you need to restrict certain water molecules. Imagine trying to surf while dictating which wavelets can lift you. The dryness of your experience might even make it seem as if there were no sea at all. It's paradoxical that countenancing sickness and death make healing more possible, but that's La Mar de Medicina. She also challenges us to step into shining health. What will have to change for you to embody your fullest vibrancy? What do you need to give up? Alternately, can you make peace with the way things are? In the vast mystery that is our experience here, there's no right and wrong, only more and more ways to love ourselves. Thanks, everybody.
Beautiful, beautiful, Stella. And Jim, so wonderful to see you. And please do your magic weaving.
Well, thank you, Stella. That was really extraordinary. I was just sitting here trying to have this simultaneity of attention on various parts of my body as you were tracking with Stephanie, and then this allowance. That's such an important aspect that oftentimes we forget when we think of the power of intent. We think it's sort of like a massive projection of power, and what you're pointing out is that it's the relaxation and giving up of outcome that is this central point of the intention itself. It's what makes it healing. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, it's almost like it's a way to potentize intention.
Yeah, by surrender. Surrender potentizes intention.
That's right.
That's
extraordinary.
Yeah.
And what the program
bring the Wu Wei.
Yes, it's absolutely the Taoism is, when everyone else rush forward and wanting more, the Taoism actually lean back to balance the back and forward. And that's create the neutrality space where all possibility is available.
And it's the practice of that. It sounds simple, which it is simple, but the practice of it within the context of the program is what builds the naturalness of that. So Stella is, saying just step back or actually drop into neutrality, but she's there. I could feel that. And I'm acutely sensitive to these relational dynamics. She is there. She's embodying it. She's transmitting it. And so is Spring. And that is coming from practice. It's coming from being in that state repeatedly. And that's what we offer within the program, within all the tracks of the program. We offer the opportunity to occupy that space, which is innate to us, but we've been so removed from it, we've forgotten that it is innate to us. So we get to be practiced in that state. And then, as people have noted in the chat, that same state transmits to collectives. And in fact, that's a major aspect of the program, is bringing these resources and that state of being, the wu-wei state of being, into a collective situation, so that we become embodiments and transmitters of regenerative health. And that way we meet the magnitude of tragedy in the world is just beyond anybody's capacity. It's only by stepping back that we can intervene with our giftedness. So the practice of stepping into that space and making it your center, making it your way of being, allows us to be of incredible service, not only to those directly impacted, but by the rippling of these tragedies into communities that are really dismantling any aspect of stability that anyone ever thought they had. I mean, you know, this whole situation that is evolving now of how we're returning to child labor, Jim. We're returning to child labor. The abuses against children, they wipe me out. They wipe me out completely. But thankfully, I could come back because of my regenerative health practices. I can come back and be of service to others. I'm devastated. I look at that and I'm devastated. But I bounce back over and over and over again. So on the personal and the collective level, the skill building to be that for our communities and for our world. If you are moved by that possibility, if you've already accumulated wisdom streams that bring you very close to embodying that, in this program is, yes, there is a credentialing process. We're so grateful to Ubiquity for their accreditation offering. It's of great value, but it's really about the dynamic. It's really about the skill building and the service to humanity.
You know, thank you, Stephanie. I want to make one more comment about your remarks, Stella, which I found so powerful. And that I loved it when you were talking about the fact that you offered this course because there was no other choice. You were so full of awareness of the madness that finally you just had to do something. And it was like you just sort of pop out of your own self with this need to do something that addresses this miasm that we're collectively in. And I was just watching your body movement, and it was just really, it was really perfect. It was a perfect expression of what you were going through. And that leads to what you were saying toward the end of your essay around bravery is crucial at this moment to generate the courage to do the right thing, even though it seems so counterintuitive and weird, given where the collective madness has gone in the culture. So I just would love to have you just say a few more words about that before we wrap up, because it's so important.
The bravery, for me, like, it wasn't brave. It was just, it was just untenable for me to not to do something, because I was just losing my mind, on like responding to things on Facebook, or like, I was just like, this cannot become my life. Like, I actually need to move all of this energy that I am wasting fighting with people and put it, into something constructive. If people actually really believe that this is where healthcare is because they don't have access to body work, or they don't have access to these amazing healers that I've had access to, then we need to get the word out. There's just no other way. But the bravery that I was referring to in that little essay is about the bravery that it takes to go inside and heal these things. It is by far the bravest thing I've ever done, was look, and I will start crying again, but like looking at all my actual fears about what would happen to Carrie if I died. Like so many of us did not want to do anything of the sort during the pandemic. We just wanted to run to whoever was going to give us the magic pill that was going to make everything okay. Or the magic shot, like anything to not countenance our actual death, right? That's actually where we need to go collectively. And it's certainly been my bravest moments, is like going inside and looking at all those things I'm terrified to feel or look at or think about or know. I mean, I do make what I sound, I say it all the time. It's so simple. It's so simple. It's so simple. It's not simple. Actually, it did take a lot of practice. But the hardest part was going inside and looking at all the anger I had, and looking at all the fear and looking at, the history that I didn't want to look at, or looking at people, the amount of trauma and the amount of horrible things that have happened on this planet, like to actually turn into that and face it. Like if we could create a culture where there's safety, it's safe enough to do that, I know that profound healing is possible, and yet it will still be scary for people. It will still require bravery to go into it. So yeah. So for any of you thinking about doing this program who are like very subtly feeling this, it's like a funny simultaneous, like, oh, please, please, please. And no, don't go there. Don't open that door. Like that is a good sign that you should do this work.
Yeah, if you're feeling uncomfortable, sign up.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
The more we can transmute those, the more we can transmute that and alchemize all that, then the more the collective field can be raised for other people to step into, and the whole thing to just snowball. Yeah.
Back to the morphogenic field. Thank you so much, Stella and Spring. Thank you for your presence today. And Stephanie, this has been really marvelous. I'm looking forward to your final session tomorrow, your grand finale. So that'll bring us to a close for today, everyone. You're all welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link in the chat box if you want to talk more with Stephanie or Stella or Spring about these very important matters in a world gone mad. Our own sanity and our own health and our own well-being becomes paramount in ways that it's never been before. And these three extraordinary human beings are bringing healing to you and to all of us in very profound ways. So thank you all. See you tomorrow. Bye for now.